Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Dent. I'm the Senior Specialist for Project Reinvest. Thank you for joining the Project Reinvest Financial Capability Applicant webinar. Today, we will review the background and program details of the third program of Project Reinvest grant opportunities. Before we begin, let's review a few housekeeping rules. All lines have been muted. This avoids any potential background disturbances. If you are listening to this presentation over your computer speaker and/or voice system, we recommend you use headphones to ensure best sound quality. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted to the Project Reinvest Financial Capability webpage for viewing and future playback. The chat box feature will be available during this webinar presentation. Please send your questions to everyone. We will address as many questions as possible during the hour presentation. Those questions that we do not get to today will be included in a revised FAQ that will be updated on a regular basis and posted to the Project Reinvest Financial Capability webpage. In February 2016, as a result of the Department of Justice settlement with Bank of America, NeighborWorks America received 25% of the tax relief funds, or approximately $122.5 million, to provide housing, counseling, neighborhood stabilization, foreclosure prevention, or similar programs. Funding for these activities are intended to maximize benefits for communities and individuals impacted by the foreclosure crisis. Project Reinvest grant opportunities include Project Reinvest Homeownership, which is to provide down payment lending to low and moderate income individuals. Project Reinvest Neighborhoods, to promote stabilization, revitalization in areas hit hard by foreclosure. And Project Reinvest Financial Capability, which is to assist individuals in stabilizing their finances, rebuilding credit, and establishing savings. Today, we will discuss only the Project Reinvest Financial Capability grant opportunity. The first two program applications are now closed. I'm going to hand it over now to the Financial Capabilities Program Director, Lisa Wilson.
Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Wilson. I'm the director of this project, and I'm so thrilled to be able to go over some items with you. I'll be going over the program details, the timeline, the funding, and the targeting, and then other staff members will give you additional information. So let's look at the program details. Who is eligible to apply for funding as a direct grantee? The first organization or applicant category we have is a financial capability intermediary. Please note that this is a term that NeighborWorks America has defined. You can find all our definitions in the funding announcement. And so if you're wondering if you fall into this category, I will refer you back to the funding announcement to look at our definitions. So for national financial capability intermediaries, we're requiring that these organizations have a minimum of 10 sub-grantees, branches, or affiliates, and that they also have a minimum of 3 years of experience performing financial capability services. For regional or state financial capability intermediaries, we are requiring that these applicants have a minimum of 5 sub-grantees, branches, or affiliates, and that they also have a minimum of 3 years of experience performing financial capability services. Additionally, HUD-approved housing counseling intermediaries can apply, as can state HSAs and NeighborWorks organizations. Finally, we have this caveat that HC intermediaries, that's the housing counseling intermediaries, state HFAs, and NeighborWorks organizations must have a minimum of 12 months of experience performing financial capability services. Okay. If you look at the very bottom of the slide, you'll note that we have stated that these grant funds are primarily intended to help individuals who are at risk of foreclosure. recovering from a foreclosure, or residents in a distressed community rebuilding after the foreclosure crisis. I just want to be very clear here that that regardless of an individual's housing status, these funds can be used to provide services to any client. So could be somebody who owns a home, who's renting a home, who's currently undergoing foreclosure. It doesn't matter, okay? You can assist them with these funds. Now let's look at the timeline. Back on December 22nd, we released our funding announcement. We launched the application last Thursday, which was January 19th. Today is the webinar on this funding opportunity. Please note that the application closes at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on March 2nd, after which there will be about a 2-month application review period. We're anticipating from March to April 2017, and then in May 2017, we hope to make award determinations. Please note that this timeline could change. At least $31.5 million will be going towards this program. Approximately $29.5 million will be awarded for financial capability counseling and coaching services, for program-related support, and for operational oversight support. I want to talk about those last 2 items very quickly. Program-related support funds will be awarded to all awardees. These funds are calculated at 20% of your financial capability counseling/coaching award. And these funds can be used towards, they can be used towards any direct costs associated with this program. Operational oversight is awarded to groups that have sub-grantees, branches, affiliates, and that is to be used to assist the direct grantee with the management of this program as it relates to their sub-branches and affiliates. And then finally, we've marked approximately $2 million for match savings funding. Now, at least 75% of all of the awards will be awarded to serve people in distressed communities identified as at the MSA level for urban areas and at the state level for rural areas. And we've used a methodology that's designed to determine what these areas of high need are. So these awards will primarily target individuals, again, who are at risk of foreclosure, recovering from a foreclosure, or residents in distressed communities. And this geographic targeting takes into consideration economic, employment, and other housing indicators. There are approximately 13 indicators that were used, and I would refer you back to the funding announcement to see what those indicators are. And now I'm going to turn over the slides to Katrin Park, who is our senior manager for the project.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through some more details on the financial capability activities that are eligible under this grant opportunity. And we've seen some questions come into the chat box. Thank you for those. I believe that the next few slides that I'm going to talk about will address some of those questions, but we will try to get to the remaining questions at various points throughout the presentation as well as at the end. So again, please remember to type your questions in the chat box and address them to everyone so that we can make sure we see your questions and collect them for both the FAQ as well as answering them on this call. So first, I'm going to just take a few slides and go more in depth about the eligible financial capability activities, starting with the financial capability counseling and coaching activities that are part of this grant. So Project Reinvest, the grant is primarily comprised of funding for financial capability counseling and coaching. And if anyone is looking for some additional elaboration on what those terms mean for the purposes of this project, I would encourage everyone to refer to the funding announcement, particularly Section 2, which includes a list of definitions for a number of terms, including financial capability, financial counseling, and financial coaching. We have intentionally used the term counseling/coaching to allow for flexibility for grantees to deliver these services through a counseling approach or a coaching approach or a combination of both of those approaches, whichever is appropriate for your clients and in accordance with your existing program design. Grantees will be required to provide up to 2 tiers of financial capability counseling and coaching to their clients. Tier 1A services are basically an initial counseling or coaching session, and it's an introduction to financial capability counseling and coaching. It must be a one-on-one session with the client. The Tier 1B services are optional, so that is to say that all grantees must provide at least that Tier 1A initial counseling or coaching session to their clients, and then they also have the option to provide a second session, which we're calling Tier 1B for this project, that provides additional services that are intended to elevate the financial capability of the client, help the client assess the progress that they've made on their goals, and if appropriate, set new goals that they'll continue to work on. I'm going to go into more details about what's involved in each of those tiers in a moment, but I'll just quickly say that the tiers of service, these 2 tiers are sequential, so clients must complete Tier 1A before they move on to receive their Tier 1B service, and grantees cannot provide Tier 1B counseling coaching to clients who have not first completed Tier 1A. Again, they're sequential, and the Tier 1B has some components that are follow-up and update type of services based on what was covered in the Tier 1A session. So you'll see on this slide, this is just a very brief, high-level snapshot of the required services that are part of Tier 1A and Tier 1B. In Tier 1A, the counselor and coach is required to deliver some sort of intake, an assessment with the client. The measurement scale that's being used for this project is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Financial Wellbeing Questionnaire. That is required to be administered to the client at the Tier 1A session as a means of assessing their financial well-being, and then again with a post-survey of a means of assessing progress on financial well-being. In the Tier 1A session, it's also required to review and discuss the client's credit report with them. It's a required service to put together a budget with the client, as well as an action plan for steps, goals that the client wishes to work on and steps that they're going to take to reach those goals, financial education, and then there are referrals are an as-needed component of Tier 1A. So in other words, if you have a client that has some additional needs that are not able to be addressed by your organization, providing referrals to other service providers to meet those needs. And finally, Tier 1A requires a follow-up, which is required within 30 days. That follow-up can take a number of different forms. It's basically a quick check-in with the client to see how they're doing on their goals. Potentially, if they wish to come back for another Tier 1B session, perhaps schedule that session. That follow-up can be via a phone call, in person, email. It's flexible as far as how that follow-up is conducted. The services that are part of the Tier 1B session, the second administration of the CFPB scale is required. The intake and assessment will already have been completed in Tier 1A. The counselor coach is required to complete an updated budget and an updated action plan based on what might have changed in the client's budget, what might have changed as far as goals they've accomplished and new goals they want to work on. Again, referrals are as needed. The credit report, depending on what's discussed in the Tier 1A session and the goals that the client sets. If the client sets a goal of working on their credit, then part of the Tier 1B session will involve reviewing a subsequent credit report with the client to discuss changes that may have occurred in the credit report between the two sessions. And finally, Tier 1B also includes a follow-up that's required within 5 months. Similarly to Tier 1A, it's meant to be a check-in with the client to see how they're going and see what future services or needs they might have. And I want to emphasize 2 things. So we've had a couple questions come into the chat box about it. So first of all, the subjects that you can, or the grantees can discuss in the counseling coaching session are very open-ended. Financial capability is meant to be broad and flexible. The financial capability philosophy, as I'm sure you know, is client-driven according to the goals that the client wishes to set and work on. So these are the required service elements that the counselor and coach must deliver. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just the minimum requirements for Project Reinvest financial capability. If a counselor or coach, according to the grantee's own program design, wishes to discuss additional specific topics, wishes to perform additional specific services beyond what's listed here, they are welcome to do so. They're free to do so. There does not have to be, there's not any sort of mandated subject to cover in the counseling coaching sessions. We've gotten a couple questions about whether clients who are not pursuing homeownership may be served. The answer is yes. Again, the client does not need to be pursuing homeownership. They do not need to be in foreclosure. It's very, as far as the types of clients you can serve and their situations, it's very open-ended, and we wanted to allow for flexibility for your organizations to provide the counseling and coaching services that you are already experienced in providing according to the needs of the clients that you serve. The second thing I want to emphasize is that this, again, is just a very brief, very high-level snapshot of each of the required services for Tier 1A and Tier 1B. Please, please, please refer to the funding announcement, particularly Section 5, for full details of what is comprised in each of these services and the documentation that grantees will be required to compile in their client files. Definitions of what these terms mean. So, for instance, you know, action plan. What does that mean for Project Reinvest? You know, what does an assessment mean? Those are included in Section 5 of the funding announcement, as well as in Section 2 definitions. We did not have time today on this webinar to get really into the weeds with definitions, but please do refer to these sections of the funding announcement for full details. I also want to say, to address another couple of quick questions that are relevant specific to Tier 1A and Tier 1B that have come in. These do need to be provided in a one-on-one setting. This is Project Reinvest is funding one-on-one counseling and coaching. If you have additional services that you wish to provide clients in a group workshop format, they're free to avail themselves of whatever other services your organization provides. But the actual counseling coaching sessions do need to be one-on-one, with the caveat that if a coach or counselor is seeing, let's say, you know, a couple, you know, spouses or 2 partners who share a household and wish to get counseling as a couple, that would count as well as a one-on-one setting. But this is funding one-on-one counseling coaching, not group workshops as such. Next, I'd like to just talk a little bit, again, very briefly, about the match savings component of Project Reinvest. As you saw in the earlier slides that Lisa discussed, there is a smaller pool of money set aside to fund match savings activities. I want to stress that this is optional. So applicants for Project Reinvest financial capability are not required to also apply for match savings funds. It's kind of a separate side pool of funds within Project Reinvest that's meant to supplement the counseling and coaching award. That being said, an applicant must apply for the counseling and coaching funds in order to also apply for match savings. In other words, an applicant cannot only apply for match savings without applying for the main part of Project Reinvest financial capability. In order to be eligible to apply for the match savings component of the funds, as I just mentioned, the applicant needs to also have applied for and been awarded the Project Reinvest financial capability grant funds from that main coaching counseling pool. Second, they need to commit to and follow through on providing Tier 1B counseling and coaching to clients that are participating in match savings programs funded by Project Reinvest financial capability. The reason being that it's important to make sure that the client has built some relationship with a counselor or coach and will have the opportunity for some continuity of service as part of participating in the match savings program, since that is generally speaking a longer time horizon and time commitment for the client. The third very important eligibility requirement for the match savings funds: applicants need to have an existing match savings program. It needs to have been active for the past 12 months. Given the kind of short period of performance and short time frame for Project Reinvest, this is not a funding pool that really allows time for a startup and planning and launch of new programs. This is funding existing match savings programs. Double enrollment of clients in the match savings programs is prohibited. And finally, the match savings program needs to be part of the direct grantees program. This is addressed in a little bit more detail in the FAQ document, so I don't want to take too much time on the webinar to get too far into the details. But if you are an intermediary applicant or a state housing finance agency applicant, you can potentially apply for match savings funds if you meet these eligibility requirements. But the match savings program needs to be your program. Obviously, if you're an intermediary or a state HFA, we don't expect that you yourselves will be delivering the direct match savings services to clients. We understand that that usually happens at the subgrantee level, but it should be a program that you have ownership over and you exercise some control and oversight over. To put that another way, what is not allowable is for an intermediary or an HFA applicant to get match savings funds and then pass those funds through to subgrantees who each have their own disparate match savings programs over which the housing counseling intermediary, financial capability intermediary, or state HFA does not exercise any oversight or control. Finally, the match savings funding may only be used to match participant deposits. There's a caveat that grantees that receive a match savings award may opt to use some of the program-related support funds from their main financial capability award to support program-related costs. That's the very brief summary. We're going to talk a little bit more in a few slides about eligible uses of funds, and you'll hear more about program-related support and some of the other components of the award at that time. Just to answer a couple of quick questions. The coaching services can be offered by trained volunteers as well as by paid staff. There's flexibility in the application for that. Financial education that was referred to on the previous slide. That financial education there's flexibility on the form that can take. You can have folks go to a group workshop if that's what your organization does. You can also provide financial education one-on-one through the coaching and counseling session. And I know a lot of questions have come in, so I apologize for not addressing them all right now. We are definitely collecting the questions, and we will respond to all of them either on this webinar or in the FAQ documents that will be updated. But I want to keep the presentation moving. And just a quick addition to what I said about paid staff versus volunteers. There will be a question in the application where applicants can discuss their staffing structure. So please do be sure to be specific in your narrative whether you're using paid staff versus volunteers for your coaching services. So finally, just to wrap up with some very brief information about additional administrative requirements for these eligible financial capability activities. Grantees will be required to collect a signed authorization form from the client, as well as provide a copy of your organization's privacy policies to all clients. Again, this grant opportunity is oriented toward organizations that are already doing this work. So you very likely, your agency already has some sort of authorization form and privacy policy that you are providing to clients. Grantees will also need to ensure that duplicate billing for clients does not occur. And grantees will also need to comply with additional data collection and management requirements that are detailed in the funding announcement. Again, I can't say this enough, but we have limited time on the webinar, so this is just a very high-level overview. Please do refer to the funding announcement for full details about compliance and other administrative requirements. Compliance with the data collection and management is particularly detailed in section 5C4 of the funding announcement. But again, please make sure you read the entire funding announcement closely to get the full scope of requirements as it pertains both to the coaching and counseling services as well as to grant compliance. Additionally, you'll hear again later about the frequently asked questions document that is posted to the Project Reinvest Financial Capability webpage. We encourage everyone to look at that periodically. In that document, we will answer common questions that we can't answer today, and particularly we address in some more detail some of the questions about financial capability, counseling and coaching services, what can be included or not included in those services that have come up in today's webinar. So again, that's an important resource that we encourage everyone to review. I am now going to turn the presentation back to Lisa Wilson, who will discuss some of the evaluation criteria and other elements of Project Reinvest Financial Capability.
Thanks, Katrin. All right, so as the submitted applications are reviewed, we've got a list of bullets here showing what we will be looking at to evaluate the application. We'll be looking at the experience of the applicant. We'll be looking at the organization's program design and management structure. We'll be looking at organizational capacity, proposed financial capability, counseling/coaching services and the impact. And we'll also be looking at the responsiveness to the areas of need. So how will these grant awards be calculated? For each tier, I want to just point out that all grant requests are calculated on a fixed basis, okay? For each tier 1A, it's $300. For each tier 1B, it's $150. Again, program-related support is calculated at 20% of the financial capability counseling/coaching award. And for operational oversight, which again is only for those organizations that are applying with sub-grantees, branches, or affiliates only, it's 7% of the financial capability counseling/coaching award. The minimum grant request is $50,000, and the maximum grant request is $3 million, and that does not include the match savings. Next, Alex is going to talk about the disbursement schedule, and Alex is the Project Reinvest Financial Capability Analyst.
Hi, so as Lisa said, I'll be talking very briefly about the disbursement schedule. So once the awards have been determined, the next step would be to finalize the documentation, so grant agreements and the notice of intent. And at that point, NeighborWorks will release an initial disbursement to kick off the program. And the breakdown of that will be that grantees will receive 35% of their total financial capability counseling and coaching award, 70% of their program-related support award, 35% of their operational oversight award, if applicable, for that particular grantee. And then for grantees that are also participating in the match savings, they will receive 35% of that total award for their match savings program as well. And then all subsequent disbursements will be made as grantees achieve specific thresholds for production throughout the program. And for more information or details on that, please see section 9 of the funding announcement with a more detailed disbursement schedule. And very briefly about reporting. So all grantees will be expected to complete regular quarterly reports throughout the duration of the program. And the reports will look at the aggregate level for their counseling coaching goals and achievements, and also include some tracking narrative questions around program progress, milestones, challenges, and then some details around spending. Here on this slide, you see a projected or an expected quarterly report schedule with the current dates that are anticipated that are subject to change if need be at a later date, but that would be finalized before grantees are expected to be reporting anyway, so that would be kind of communicated. But this is what we have at this stage, preliminarily at least, that we expect. And then lastly, the final report will be due no later than 45 days after the performance period. And then that would mirror pretty closely the quarterly reports, but have a little bit of additional detail on revenue and expenditures. And for further information about this, please see Exhibit C, which is a document that includes the required data points, and that is also on the website. And you will find as well a draft of a quarterly report for further details that kind of gets into the, just elaborates a little bit on that process if you're interested in that. And then now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Leandra DeShields, who is a program manager for quality control and compliance, and she'll take us into some of the quality control and compliance elements of the program.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So as it relates to quality control and compliance for the Project Reinvest Financial Capability Grant, grantees will be monitored throughout the grant performance period to ensure compliance with all terms, conditions, and requirements of the award. Compliance monitoring will be conducted throughout the performance period and will include both on-site and remote reviews by quality control and compliance staff and or a selected third party on behalf of NeighborWorks America. So looking at general compliance for the Financial Capability Project, the documents listed on this slide will be collected and reviewed either at the time of application or at another time throughout the performance period. And these documents are the independent audit, also known as the financial package. And grantees must have completed an independent audit within 9 months of the completion of their most recent fiscal year, and will be required to send NeighborWorks a complete audit package, which would include the audited financial statements, the single audit if applicable, corrective action plan if applicable, management letter if it's been issued, your organization's response to the management letter if that applies, and any specific clarifying documentation NeighborWorks may request based on the review of the complete audit package that has been submitted. Next, grantees must provide proof of insurance, which is either fidelity bond coverage or an honesty insurance policy that names NeighborWorks as an additional insurer. Also, the policy must be at least equal to the lesser of either the grantee's award amount or $100,000. Also, grantees must establish and comply with a records retention policy. Documentation as it relates to the financial capability grant must be maintained for a period of no less than 3 years from the date of submission of your final report. Grantees also must have policies and procedures in place for the recovery of the destruction of program-related records as a result of any type of natural or man-made disaster like a flood or fire. And lastly, grantees must have policies to handle and dispose of clients' personal information, also known as PII, in accordance with any applicable laws and regulations. Right, and as previously stated, NeighborWorks will conduct on-site and remote compliance monitoring to ensure compliance of the grant award, and the compliance testing procedures are either considered as part of our standard programmatic testing or client file reviews. So with standard programmatic testing, that can include, but is not limited to, expenditure testing, oversight plan monitoring of sub-grantees, branches, affiliates, and or their contracted counseling entities, also known as CCEs, confirmation that your organization has a representations and warranty certification, and that you have an MOU in regards to translation services, or that you're able to provide translation services in-house. Then we have the client file reviews, and which are the documents that are completed and collected at the time of counseling. So those action items from Tier 1A and Tier 1B counseling, the intake form, assessment, action plan, all those documents that were just discussed. And then also additional testing parameters are currently being developed for the match savings program. And all of these documents are important because if your organization does not comply, if your organization does not comply with compliance requests or through compliance monitoring, the quality control and compliance team, or if we discover an issue, grantees will be subject to the policies and procedures as outlined in the Project Reinvest events of default and remedies policy, which details the conditions that may result in suspension, recapture, or deobligation of funds. And the events of default and remedies policy also provides grantees with guidance on mitigating risk of events of default. So if you have any questions as it relates to compliance, please feel free to send a message to the Project Reinvest inbox, and your questions will be filled over to our team. And final compliance requirements will be included in the grant agreement, as well as a separate compliance WebEx will be held for those organizations that are awarded funds. Okay, so next we have Graham McDonald, who is a grant specialist.
Thank you. And I'm just going to speak very quickly to the technical aspects of accessing the system and beginning an application, but I do want to hand it over to Lisa Wilson just to answer one of the questions that came through the chat very quickly.
Okay, so one of the questions that came in through the chat was asking if we could restate the minimum and maximum grant request amounts. Again, the minimum grant request amount is $50,000 and the maximum grant request amount is $3 million, and that does not include the match savings.
Thank you. So in an effort to better serve applicants and grantees, NeighborWorks America has implemented a new grant system that is now online. Project Reinvest Financial Capability is the third funding opportunity to utilize this new system, which can be accessed at neighborworks.flux.io. Some of you who have applied for either of the previous Project Reinvest opportunities may already be familiar with this system, but I will describe the process for registering and accessing the system. So, in order to begin an application for Project Reinvest Financial Capability, you will first need to register your organization to gain access to the new grants portal. All prospective applicants who have not yet registered in the new grants portal, including those who are prior NeighborWorks America grantees, will need to complete this process. And I do want to note that login credentials from our previous system, GrantWorks, will not work in the new system. To submit a registration, click Create an Account Now from the portal homepage and complete all of the required registration fields. Registration is restricted to authorized officials that have the authority to submit a grant application on behalf of their organization. And I'll speak a bit more about user types and permissions in just a moment. One registration per organization is permitted within the portal, and your registration may take up to 2 business days to be reviewed. If your registration is approved, you'll receive a confirmation email that includes a link to generate your username and create a password. Once you've set your password, the process is complete and you may log directly into the portal. So as I mentioned a moment ago, there are 2 security roles defined for the NeighborWorks America Grants portal. The first is authorized official and the second is organization editor. And these 2 roles have different permission levels to work on applications within the system. An organization's authorized official, which is a senior manager within the organization with the authority to approve and enter into contracts and agreements with third parties, can add organization editors to its profile and also has full rights to create, edit, save, delete, or submit a Project Reinvest Financial Capability application. Organization editors, on the other hand, do not have permission to initiate, delete, or submit an application, but can edit or save draft applications in the system. And I do want to note that each organization is permitted up to 5 authorized official users and up to 5 organization editors users at a time. In order to help prospective applicants navigate the portal registration and application processes, we have created a grants portal user guide, which can be accessed on the Project Reinvest Financial Capability homepage. And it has detailed information on both portal registration, the steps I've outlined, and the steps necessary to successfully submit a Project Reinvest Financial Capability application. We do highly recommend that you review this guide prior to using the system or beginning an application for this opportunity. It contains very important information that will guide you through the process. After you've successfully registered in the system, you will be able to access the application. And before you get started, we do also highly recommend that you review the Project Reinvest Financial Capability Application Guide, to learn more about how to successfully submit your application. We do recommend that you review the guide in its entirety and keep it close by for reference as you complete the application. It includes important general reminders about the application, including a complete list of the questions within the application, additional guidance and clarifying information for completing the questions, what reviewers might look for as they review your application, tips to ensure your hard work is not lost due to technical difficulties, and finally, important information about the program's policies on incomplete applications and the no resubmission policy. And finally, the guide will also walk through technical details of submission, and that includes times and availability of technical support. And we do highly recommend that applicants submit their full application before the final day of the application deadline to avoid any technical delays. As I mentioned, no applications will be accepted after the stipulated deadline without exception, and there will be a limited number of support staff available to assist applicants with their application submission kind of as we approach the final hour of the deadline. And calls and emails will be answered on a first-come, first-served basis as we approach that deadline. And that's all I have there. So I do encourage you to reference all of the materials that I've discussed, and I will hand it back over to Rochelle to wrap up.
So we do want to note the FAQ document that we've mentioned several times during the webinar, that it will be posted online along with this webinar. The recording of this webinar will be posted on Project Reinvest Financial Capabilities webpage. The slides will also be posted within the end of next week. But the FAQ document will be posted. It has answers and explanations and clarifications for common asked questions about Project Reinvest financial capabilities, excuse me. In addition to that, we'll have office hours. It is a series of open question and answer sessions with Project Reinvest staff for 30 minutes each to discuss Project Reinvest capability, timelines, program details, and more. The first session will be held on February 2nd at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please visit the Project Reinvest Financial Capability webpage for more information. And lastly, we have more ways for you to contact us with your questions. There's a general information website of www.neighborworks.org/Project Reinvest. And then the Project Reinvest Financial Capabilities webpage is also available. And for technical support questions, please call our technical support line at 1-866-720-1807. And if you have any program-related questions, please email projectreinvest@nw.org.
Thank you for joining us in this webinar. I'm extremely thrilled to see the amount of interest, and I hope to be working with you guys in the future. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.